I am legitimately glad everyone's here at 10 in the morning to get really mad with me, really, really angry. Like, I like to think if you turn up to a talk called Open Source Exploitation at 10 in the morning, got a little bit of fire in your bellies. So, really, really combative title, honestly. The truth is, I don't have a title for this talk that works. It's horrible, and it's difficult, and it's because all of the titles sound so relentlessly negative that I kind of don't want to use them. So I promise this talk isn't really about being negative. It's a talk about the work we have to do to be better as an industry. And as someone that doesn't believe in hills or walking up hills or dying on hills, I think this might be the hill I'll die on. What I really want to talk about here today is how open source in the most cases has been turned into exploitation by the biggest organizations in the world, and how it's used to extricate free labor from all of you, and how that's fundamentally quite a bad thing, actually, really. I'm going to talk about how we can do better, and how I think that some of the systems that we use need to change to better support authors in our communities and take something that I dearly love and help it actually survive. Because right now I kind of feel like open source is in kind of the most precarious place it's ever been in its entire history, and nobody is talking about it. It's weird. So I'm somewhat conspicuous to anyone that hasn't met me. I wrote a few books, I built some things, and I taught a bunch of kids, but what I really love is technology. And even more than technology, I love the people that make it. And hands up here if you've ever contributed to open source. Okay, do you still do so? Okay, excellent. The people that are really going to be mad at me. So I kind of think this is one of the most important talks that I've ever sat down to try and write, because open source is obviously important. Like, you all use it every day. So before I start with the gory details, I want to talk about loving things. Right? Really, really important. It's important to understand that you can be critical of things that you really, really dearly love because you want them to be better, not because you want to harm them. I've been building open source software since the actual 90s, when the internet was a village and everything was really, really tiny. It was kind of the thing that grew out of computer clubs. And it's important to understand that on like a journey of maturity, the techniques and opinions and approaches that get you from A to B, and not necessarily the tools and approaches you need to get yourself from B to C, right? People really, really often struggle with that fact, because people are kind of beautiful, simple creatures that presume that because something has worked once before, it's going to work in exactly the same shape again, regardless of the fact that context changes around us. And as technologists and as an industry, we have to embrace this if we want open source to survive. Now, open source one, right? This is like a really, really common thing that you'll hear anyone say. We all use Visual Studio Code. People use, Linux VMs, and this is like 2018, 40% of Azure VMs on the Microsoft hosted platform were Linux. Single biggest contributor. If that isn't open source winning, I don't know what really is, And it won the hearts and minds of people by telling them that software could and should be free. Now, free is a really, really complicated word when we think about open source. And the GPL and its variants were probably not the first permissive and free software licenses. There were licenses that came before that. But the GPL was the first license that really gained rapid mind share, and mostly it was because of Linux, right? Like, Linux rose in the 90s, popularized the GPL, and really, Linux is just the tip of the iceberg that pushed open source software into the mainstream, and its license was originally described by the Free Software Foundation as free as in speech, not as in beer, which I always thought was like a really confounding, terrible sentence that required quite a good grasp of English to really understand. So what does that really actually mean? So in simple terms, if you use source code available under the GPL, you need to make your changes public for people to use. Very, very simple. So this is because the Free Software Foundation promoted what they called software freedoms. And it was all very, it was a little bit hippie, a little bit kind of community left-wing, cool. But it was the right of software to be liberated, which is interesting, the right of software. And the idea was that, as users could modify its source, and they could force people legally to get all those changes back into the public domain, and everyone would be happy and good and share things, which is, a really super noble goal, right? I kind of agree with their motivations here. And it shows its lineage because it became the license used to build a Unix clone, which was meant to be available to all, specifically because Unix was too expensive and proprietary at the time. So this whole thing was built around people sharing code with each other at local computer clubs and in universities and education. So it's important to remember that free never meant free from cost. There was nothing about money, nothing about price. It always meant free as in liberating, free as in freedom. And I think, because much of the original literature focused on that, they use the term gratis because free was confusing. Now, what free software doesn't mean is necessarily using the GPL. So the way they put it, and this is their official FAQ, is, not at all. Free software isn't the GPL. There are many other free software licenses. They maintain an incomplete list of licenses that contain those same central software freedoms that make free software available to be changed. So the way that they kind of promote this is that using the GPL requires that released improved versions also get licensed under the GPL. So if anyone has ever used kind of GPL software at work, you'll know it's often quite contentious because it's kind of a little bit viral in nature, and it means that anything that you use that's built on top of it kind of is forced into the public domain. So super cool. But despite Linux and despite the original limited forays into open source by people like Red Hat, actually that strong copyleft viral moment of the GPL was not actually the reason that open source won. Despite the best intentions, it's not the thing that made open source really get a foothold in the commercial market. And it's certainly not the reasons that ultra mega corps like Microsoft and Amazon and Google champion open source, right? Big corporations do not want to give you everything that they own for free. Otherwise, they would not be successful. So the widespread adoption of open source in enterprise is kind of directly related to the MIT license and the Apache permissive licenses. And the difference between those licenses and the original GPL is they don't force people to contribute back. They don't force people that build on top of that software to reshare their modifications. And actually, permissive licensing allowed individuals or organizations to take your work, build on top of it, and even operate your work and operate modified copies of your work for profit. Right? And much like the GPL, the aim of open source was not to restrict commercial exploitation. It was never in the original documentation, but it was to ensure the freedom of the software itself. So, who actually benefits from permissive licensing? Now, it's a trick question, really, because in any situation where there's a dramatic power imbalance between the people doing the work and the people making money from the work, let's say, you and the 4 or 5 largest organizations in the entire world, feels like a good power imbalance, doesn't it, if we have any example of one. The organization is always the people that will benefit, always, because they have the means to leverage the work that you do. Now, without wanting to, trying to avoid sounding like a naysayer, because again, I assure you, I deeply, deeply love open source and software freedom and sharing and learning. Open source has been the biggest learning tool that we've ever had in software. I cannot say loudly enough that multinational organizations do not give one single solitary fuck about you and about your livelihoods and about the work that you do. They do not care about you. They cannot care about you. But you know what they do care about? They care about free value. They care about free value that they are able to commercially exploit. And the wide proliferation of software and business is a direct relation and a result of licenses like the Apache license and the MIT license being leveraged into closed source, proprietary, for-profit work. Like, you want to test this theory? I'll give you a test, it's fun. Go into your office tomorrow and try put some GPL code into your software and see what your manager says. Like, it's a bit sad, honestly. So, permissive licenses specifically and explicitly and without recourse shift the balance of power towards large technical organizations away from individual authors and creators. It's all they have ever done, right? They have the might to leverage the code that you write and the capability to build upon it, and they have the incentive and organizational structures to operate your software at scale to make money. You do not. Open source software took hold in the enterprise precisely because it allowed itself to be exploited for profit. Exactly for that reason. I mean, every time I do this talk, everyone's like, oh, exploited. Exploited is a really combative word. No, it's really, really accurate. Really accurate. It's not exactly negative. Exploited, the action or fact of treating someone unfairly in order to benefit from their work. Awkward. And people are often like, oh no, but these licenses were written by really smart people with really, really good motivation. Surely they are too smart to get exploited. And we've all seen this before, but like, it's just this, isn't it? Right? This is the truth. The vast majority of open source projects are not funded, even really, really super important ones. There is no art without patronage. There never has been. None. The only successful open source projects in the world are either backed by enormous companies that use them for strategic marketing and product advantage, or rely on the exploitation of free labor for the gain of organizations operating those products or the services. They're the only things that have ever been successful out of open source. It fucking sucks. I can see people always line up, oh, but GitHub has donations. Yeah. What about Patreon? I once donated to an open source project. And, when people make those arguments, I feel like they're just undermining themselves, right? Like it breaks my heart a little bit. We've all watched people burn out. We've watched people trying to do the dual licensing thing. We've watched people try and do commercial support contracts. And we've watched them go to all the legal legwork to kind of build extra kind of contractual requirements. And all of those people, and if you talk to any of them, they sell like single-digit percentage numbers of those alternate revenue streams. We see packages with 20 million downloads languish because nobody is willing to pay for the work. And, it's basically a hellscape that victimizes creators. So, the truth is I would not wish an open source project to be successful for any creator. It's like just a set of golden handcuffs. So I asked Reddit about it when I got really angry about this. So I made this casual observation in a Reddit thread, and, what I said was, it's really, really wild that I can take your open source project and I can go on Twitch and I can stream myself reading the code base and make more money from ad clicks than the people that wrote the code. Like, that's totally, totally wild to me. It's absolutely perverse. So here are some direct quotes. Oh God, so you hate GCC and Linux too, since they're developed by and for companies. I didn't say that. Arguing against free software. What year is it? It's free. Why wouldn't it be free for everybody? That includes organizations. I'm honestly not clear what you're suggesting specifically and logistically. I just said it was sad I can make more money than the people writing the software. So obviously, it's Reddit, so you get downvoted into oblivion because people seem to interpret, hey, perhaps multinational organizations should pay you for your work, as I don't think software freedom is a good idea. Idiots. But the truth is I was more astonished by people suggesting that charging for software was somehow in contradiction with this ethos of free and modifiable software, when actually all that position really shows is they never read the license. Right? They really took the word free and ran with it. So here's a funny story. We've been here before, right? I don't think Lars Ulrich has ever had anyone say Lars Ulrich was right in public very often. So for people as decrepit and old as me, in 1999, Napster heralded the popularization of peer-to-peer file sharing networks, and Metallica, of all people, litigated against it. And they were basically vilified by everyone, by the entire music community, by all the technical people for fighting against the rolling tide of technology. You can't fight technology. And the truth is, if you think about 1999, the music business had become like a corporate fat cat, nickel and dime kind of industry that exploited their artists. CDs cost, in the UK, 22 pounds for pennies to manufacture. Bands were filthy rich, and record executives were laughing and taking the profit, and we all cried, what the fuck do Metallica know? They're rich already. We just want new music. We're not stealing anything. So I spent the whole of my mid-teens pirating music on the internet, right? All of it. I used Napster, Audio Galaxy, LimeWire, Kazaa, Direct Connect, all the hits. And you know what? If anyone had spent time listening to what Lars Ulrich actually said, they'd realize he was actually 100% correct. And everything he said has happened since then. Like, it's really horrible, right? So I read an interview with him recently where he looks back on it and he's quite reflective, because what he actually said at the time was, let me get the quote, "We're devaluing the work of musicians. It doesn't affect me. I'm already rich. But it will affect every band that comes after me. I'm already a multimillionaire. File sharing devalues the work, and once it's done, it can never be undone." Yeah, kind of awkward that, isn't it? After 1999, the music industry was never the same, right? Small touring bands that would make really comfortable livings in the 90s basically scrape by in 2020s. Niche underground genres like that I love are more vibrant than ever, but every single band has a day job. Every single band is a glorified t-shirt manufacturer, right? It's really tragic. Like, we devalued the work by giving it all away, and I was wrong as a teenager. And, when you give it all away, the only people that profit from it are the large organizations that are in power. So like Live Nation. So Spotify also today now occupies that space where the labels once were. Vastly profitable, enormous organizations, while artists figuratively and sometimes literally starve. So he was right. Hi. This is where we are. And you know what? I wish I had the fine wine and art collection that Lars Ulrich does to get me through the next 30 years when we fuck our entire industry. But forgive me for feeling a little bit like I'm standing here desperately hoping that people will listen. Because we are here right now. And, I love open source, just like Lars loved tape trading and underground music. Like the drummer of Metallica famously used to run DIY music zines and sent tapes of underground heavy metal to people. It's not that he hated sharing music. It's not that he hated community. He just realized that actually the devaluing of the work was more important. And what's happening is we're kind of letting ourselves be weaponized. It's kind of a violence. It doesn't put humans and maintainers at the center of the problem. Instead, the organizational exploitation of software is the core goal of a permissive license. And the truth is, we all made a tragic mistake in thinking that the ownership model that was good enough for you and me as friends in a computer club is the same model that we need to deal with very, very large organizations that are amoral and are not human. So, here's the really scary part. We got here because this is what we wanted. I hate it. We got here because this is what we wanted. I did this. You all did this. We all made this mistake. I spent at least 15 years advocating for the adoption of open source software in the mid to large size organizations that I was working in myself. I, myself, sat and I wrote policies suggesting that while we needed to adopt and contribute if we could, organizations never do, to open source, mostly for strategic and marketing benefit, that we really should only look at permissive licensing, right? I wrote that policy. I wrote the no GPL policy. I did. And, anything else would be bad, right? Because we'd have to pay for it. And it would force us to give away our software at worst. And God, I was just wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong the whole time. I should have spent that time advocating that we licensed dual license software and that we paid contributors and that we hired them and sponsored them to do work. I was wrong. I fucked up. And I'm sorry. And I feel like I let everyone down, right? And I feel like all the people in positions of power that made those same decisions let everyone down too. And here's the problem though, it's not just me. It's really not. And every time a small organization or creator tries to license software in a way that protects them from exploitation by big business, like, when AWS took Elastic's property, or recently Apollo, who do GraphQL, they try and do dual licensing or try and find a way to have like an open core and charge for the good bits. Every single one of us in the community goes to the internet and we savage them. We cannibalize ourselves, and you'll see the threads for hours sitting there saying, oh, how dare they do this? The truth is, it's their work. We need to be better at actually supporting each other and supporting our peers. At knowing that whenever a creator cries about burnout, or that they can't pay the rent in kudos or likes, or that they need to advertise for work in their NPM packages because they're unemployed, that they really mean it. These are the people doing the heavy lifting. And it could be you. It could really be you. And I have sat and watched our entire community criticize people who are just saying, hey, I'm putting in thousands of hours of unpaid work here. Can someone please help me? And nobody ever does. I want you to get paid. I want you to be able to afford to eat. I want you to have nice things. I want you to work sustainably. I want a world where it's viable for small single creators to make a living doing what we're good at and building things. If we have to operate in this kind of late stage capitalistic hellhole, I want it to be on our terms and not on the terms of Amazon and Microsoft and Google. So, can companies actually ever do a good job in this space? Is it even possible? Now, I think absolutely they can. I think it's totally possible, It's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel before we talk about what we need to do to kind of readdress this. I think there are companies that do really good work in open source. I think they fund it well. I think they hire creators. I think they sponsor people. They all have reasons for doing so. It's not altruistic, but there's nothing wrong with having mutually beneficial arrangements. And even some of the biggest players in the industry have started to have more kind of ethical approaches to open source. I mean, the truth is, you look at someone like Microsoft, right? Microsoft contribute a lot now. It's all for marketing. But that's okay. It's fine. It's okay that it's for marketing, as long as we understand that that's the deal we're making. And ultimately, they do it to sell products and services, right? Like Microsoft's contributions to open source are so you buy Azure. That's what they're doing, and that's okay. But if we're here to interact with these organizations, then there's nothing wrong with taking the software that they make available for free and remembering that your patronage is the product. It's cool. And even the products that you might perceive to be independent, like Linux is a great example, they all have funding structures or staff provided by organizations. And I think that's okay. It's fine that Microsoft are the biggest contributor to the Linux kernel. It's fine that Red Hat spent years in that position as well. So I think the open source software that you produce is not the same as the open source software they produce. And I think you have to remember that. Not all the things are the same, and it's a bit foolish to think they are. So how do we change this? How do we make everything better? I think we need better approaches, better systems, along with the cooperation of all of the major vendors in our software ecosystem to really make a dent in this problem at all. Because all of the grassroots attempts to do this kind of fail without the support of the behemoths, right? It's not going to be easy, but I think there's a role for us all in this. So, firstly, please pay for software. I know it sounds a bit lame to say, please pay for software, here's a tip jar. But the easiest and the most free of all ways we can solve this problem, right? The next time each of you is about to send that shitty tweet because Docker Desktop is now paid software, fucking pay for it. Go to your manager and be like, hey, this is actually a licensing cost, and it's actually a good thing. You get paid to do your day jobs, those people deserve to eat. We need to support those people. You know, the next time you see a library adopting an open core licensing model, where all the value-added features are around it, or the integrations are paid-for features, consider paying for the features, right? We make the world better by supporting each other. Whenever a maintainer asks for support or help, and you have the time and inclination, offer it. Even if all you're doing is reading documentation and correcting spelling mistakes, that's something. It's better than nothing. Don't be entitled. Don't write the shitty Reddit comments shouting down the peers, because it could be you. It could be you. Just be a bit kinder. I think we also need to kind of rehabilitate package management. I think this is probably kind of going to be table stakes in whatever the next version of programming languages and platforms are. You know, I think, you know, whatever language V next is, I think the package management solution needs to support billing at point of consumption. I think it's absolutely table stakes. You know, I have a theory that kind of more organizations would actually pay for software if it was easy. But at the moment, like, you've all been there, right? You want to pay for a piece of software and you've got to go to procurement and fill in 100 forms, and then they send you like an open source vendor assurance form where, and I kid you not, my own compliance department sent me this form to take to a vendor that I know very well. And the questions are like, what is the major version of the operating system you use in your desktops in your office? And they're like, fuck man, we're like 5 people that work distributed. What's your health and safety policy for fire drills? It's my own forms. And I had to hand them to them, just like, I'm so sorry, just like put some bullshit in there and I'll try and cover up for it when you send it me back. You know, I think if we fix package management so that you can pay for your NuGet packages as part of your Azure bill, organizations would actually do it, you know. And, you know, there are a couple of products in the area that are trying to do this. Things like SDK bin is trying to push this kind of point of consumption license per download model. And I think it's cool. I think we need to be talking to Microsoft and Google and Amazon. You all probably work in companies where you have professional relationships or kind of reps or commercial support. You know, I want to pay for libraries using their billing systems. You know, I want it in my AWS bill. I want it in my GCP bill. You know, while I've complained in this talk a lot about large organizations leveraging open source throughout, I think actually those large organizations aren't fundamentally bad or evil. They're just amoral, and they operate in their best interests. So if all of their customers are saying this is the way we want to consume software, just like everyone told Microsoft for years they wanted free tooling, they will capitulate. They will do it. You know, and you know, here's the truth: the first platform, the first programming language, the first ecosystem that lets me sell software components, they can have their cut. That's fair. That's an exchange of value. They're doing the work. I think that would unlock a huge category of software sales that just do not exist today. You know, because today, if you want to make money from something you have to use kind of their marketplace models, and normally it comes with like a lot of contracts and a lot of managed services, and you agree to resell things, and you know, it's just a lot for most people. Imagine, instead of trying to work through some like asinine procurement process, you could just add NuGet or NPM or cargo packages, and it gets rolled up into your cloud bill and you never see it. I think that'd be cool. I think this is the best thing that actually the vendors can do to support creators and actually build a real marketplace. I think that would be sustainable for the people inside of it. I think we also need to kind of keep fighting. You know, we need to keep on iterating on licenses. We need to fight for free software for users, for teachers, for our friends. Like, I feel like I need to double down on what I said at the start of this. I love open source dearly, and I do not want it to go away. You know, I don't want to take the code away. You know, I think the last 20, 25 years in software, as a direct result of open source, is why most of us are here. I think that's amazing. But we have to understand that what got it to this place and what got everyone into the market is also the same thing that's currently threatening its sustainable existence. Open source doesn't have to be a proxy for the exploitation of the individual. It can be ethical, like we can survive this. I don't want to take the source code away. I just desperately want to have enough people critically thinking about the way they consume things to, you know, so when it's your great new idea, when you're having a shower and you have the idea you think is going to make you money, like you can meaningfully benefit from it yourself for your work. You know, by all means, give your software away to your peers, but spare no pity for the large companies, right? I would be perfectly happy if every open source project in the world basically rewrote their license to be, anyone can have this, but not Microsoft, Amazon, or Google, right? Not those guys. So it's funny, like what I'm really saying is kind of support the scene. In music, there's this idea of supporting the scene and kind of grassroots movements, you know, because, you know, the scene is kind of our musical heritage, a shared place where the art comes from. And, you know, I think that's the moment we're at with software, right? Like it's ours and it's being taken from us. This is our culture, right? Pay your friends for their software and accept it gracefully when, you know, they want to give it you for free. You know, I think that's the most important thing, and I think we can change this. So thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions or want to set me on fire for saying that everything you love sucks? There we go, there's the guy.
Thank you for the talk. It was really interesting. It's not really a question, more like a takeaway from what you were talking about. And what my takeaway is, and what I resonated with what you said is things that are usually meant to be used or done easily. I think people do that, and what makes sense to me or what's relating, I guess, in the consumer field. For example, if you can watch a movie or listen to a song and pay for it easily, I think people tend to do that nowadays more often. And I think maybe I understand it could work even for the corporate level if you make things, if you make this payment
make it easy, right?
Yeah, and people will probably do that.
100%. I think that's a really, really interesting observation, because if you look at like the trend of piracy over time, like the rise of accessible streaming services is, you know, inversely related to the decline in piracy over time. The funny thing is, at the moment, we're seeing an uptick as the market conditions get tighter, and all of, you know, we've all seen this, like every fucking 3 months, Spotify becomes €2 more expensive, and Netflix stops login sharing, and we're watching piracy rise again because they finally kind of made it suck again, right? It's like if you've got to subscribe to 10 services, no one's ever going to do it. You know, access is the most important thing, and you know, my feeling is, and you know, when I was young and I was working in my first couple of companies, what was really great for me is when I could use an open source piece of software to make my day easier. And I think I just never made the mental leap of like, well, sure, my day is easier, but kind of fuck me. Like, I'm getting paid for this time. Why is it okay that my day is made easier at the expense of whoever is doing this work? And, you know, the software community in the 90s, when all this stuff really took off, was so different than it is now. You know, if you look at like graphs that chart the number of people that even had an internet connection, were like 10, 20 times where we were at now. Number of people in software is bigger as well. It's just like, it's not the same anymore. Anyone else have any questions?